Jinkx, welcome to Bullseye. I am so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I got to tell you, I saw Cole Escola in this show,
Yeah, me too.
and Cole Escola is really something else. And I would be terrified to be taking on any role that Cole had originated.
Yeah, there's a little terror there, but the terror is exciting. I've known Cole a long time, and Cole is a singular performer, and in my opinion, the funniest person alive right now. So I studied Cole's performance, and then I did everything I could to forget about it, you know? I saw Cole perform it multiple times, starting off Broadway at the Lortel, and then when I signed on for the role, I was given a video to watch for the blocking and to help with everything, and so I watched Cole perform the role over and over and over. And I just knew, okay, so that's what Cole did. And then I went and saw Titus, and I was like, okay, so that's what Titus did. And I never went in thinking, okay, I have to outdo anyone. I just have to bring my version of it, you know? And the more I lean into what I can bring uniquely to it, the less people are going to worry about how it compares to someone else's performance because they're just gonna see a new, unique performance, you know? If I were trying to recreate Cole's performance, then you'd probably notice some glaring issues.
Can I ask you a specific follow up here?
Yeah.
You mentioned the blocking. Does the blocking remain the same here?
Yeah, the important blocking does, as in, like, the crucial, essential blocking for lights and for key moments in the show that everyone depends on so everyone can do their job in correspondence to those moments. So there's sound cues and wardrobe and everything. But lest we forget, Sam Pinkleton won a Tony for the direction of this show. So honoring the blocking and honoring that is honoring Sam's work as well. And if we came in like a wrecking ball and just undid it, then, that's it's not a wrecking ball that has the Tony right now, you know what I
Jinx, that
mean?
said, I'm glad you brought up Wrecking Balls because I'll be frank, in the two versions of the show that I have seen, the blocking is not unlike a wrecking ball. I mean,
Yeah,
that character flings herself around the stage
yeah.
in an absolutely bonkers manner. And Cole, I mean, they're little and dainty,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like dropping an ant off the Empire State Building and it won't get hurt when it hits the ground
Is
because of
that
the
true?
ratio of the area.
Well,
I
I
believe
mean,
that's
still
true.
terrifying for the
Yeah,
ant. I have to
that's true.
imagine. Think of how long they're falling.
I think they're probably upset that they're separated from their friends. That's
For
very
an
important
ant,
to
that
ants.
is yes, exactly. Good show of empathy there.
Thank you.
Um, you know, that's a big part of why the blocking is specific, you know, to be able to do that stuff and not hurt yourself and other actors. That's an important element here. It's like stage combat. If everyone just grabbed a sword and started swinging, that would be horrible. That would not be fun to watch. That wouldn't be fun for the people involved. So we rigorously choreograph our fights. Like I just did Pirates. I was sword fighting for months, and we had a sword fight call every single day to make sure that no one was not completely aware of what they were going to do that night with where their body was at or whatever, And that's hugely important because if you skip over that stuff, that's how people get hurt. And to be able to do everything that you described Mary doing, you have to know how to do it safely, or you're only going to do it once. You know what I mean? And what we need is you to be able to do it sustainably for 8 times a week.
What about these outfits? Mary Todd Lincoln wears some pretty extraordinary outfits in the
Compared to
show.
what?
Okay, fair.
I'm
Like
teasing you. I'm teasing
I
you.
haven't been a professional drag performer for a couple of decades, but
Yeah.
the thing that struck me about these outfits when I saw them in person particularly is the skirts, which are not just wide, but are tall in any body position. Like Cole would throw themselves down onto the stage and just be, it was as though they had like landed in one of those giant balloons that
Yeah.
stuntmen jump off of buildings into. Like just completely enveloped vertically in those skirts.
And that is not something that every hoop skirt does. That's something that a professionally designed hoop skirt for this purpose does. And that's, again, why I say, honoring the production that you step into. When you're on stage, you're not just there for you, you're representing the costumer, the wig designer, the playwright, the director. There's a lot of responsibility involved in comedy. I gotta say, like, especially at this level, it's not a one-person show. And even one-person shows aren't one-person shows, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. I just feel honored to be trusted with all of this because I've worn, as you said, a number of outstanding outfits in my life that are very cumbersome and restrictive and god awful. But this one is just top notch. Like everything has been considered. It's an indestructible hoop skirt. And that effect you talked about was manufactured and engineered by the team that created the costumery. And so it's not nothing in Oh Mary happens by mistake, even though, as you said, and aptly, it's like a wrecking ball. The show swings in these huge pendulums, pendulumic, it's a pendulum. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's a
Mm-hmm.
wrecking ball. I don't know why
Yeah.
I'm building on it. It's a wrecking ball. A wrecking ball's a pendulum. Why did I have to qualify it? Anyway, there you go.
I mean, Mary Todd Lincoln in the show is sort of like is like a gremlin after dark, after midnight, like a wet gremlin. I can't remember the rules of gremlins
It's
exactly, but
you feed them after midnight. That makes more gremlins. You get them wet, they turn icky. No, I got it all
it's
backwards.
like the
No,
crazy
now I've got it
gremlins.
backwards. You get them wet, they make more. Anyway, the point is, what I like to say, Mary Todd is just completely honest. She just says what is in her head in that moment. Unless she's hiding the truth for a purpose, but, like, she has a really hard time not just saying what's on her mind, and that's the thing I think I find the most freeing about her because I like to think these days I have good instincts and good intuition, and I can trust my instincts and intuition, and so sometimes I find myself saying just what's in my mind, and then I look at the person I'm talking to and I go, "Sorry, that was a little blunt, but now I've said it." And then they go, "You know what? Let's talk about it. It's right." And I'm like I'm like, "Okay, there's something to like if there's an elephant in the room, talk about it. Find a way to talk about it." Mary does it in a very aggressive way. I do it in a very passive way, I guess, I just say, "Hey, has anyone noticed that elephant?"
One of the things about the character is that I think it's rare for a woman character in comedy to get to have that level of id.
Mm,
I think it's pretty common for male comedy characters to be uninhibited and crazy and do whatever the first thing that comes to their head is. I mean, that's half of the characters Will Ferrell has ever played, or
Mhm.
John Belushi, or all these other characters, right? But Mary Todd Lincoln is a woman in the show, and they don't get to do that much in comedy. It's
Yeah.
rare.
You know, many, many queer people just really honor the divine feminine, and, we just wanna celebrate the things we love most about our favorite women, and that's what drag stems from, I think. When I get into drag and I'm resembling someone, it's very intentional, and so I think, you know, the reason why female characters don't get to do that often is because female characters are constantly dealing with circumstances that male characters don't deal with. The costume, for one. I mean, all the men are in pants and suits, like they're wearing what men wear today, and the women are in parade floats. Like, it is an athletic thing to do what Mary does because of that, and most women wouldn't wanna put themselves through the athleticism required to do that, and that's by design. That is a costume right now, but that is what people wore. So now you have Mary, who has all of those circumstances that normally would inhibit her. Except she's the president's wife, and she's protected, and she's at the top of the food chain. She gets to not care about those things. And we see another woman in the show, Louise, dealing with those circumstances in the opposite direction by adhering to them. And all of this is whether Cole did this intentionally or Cole just so deeply gets it. Like, that's the brilliant thing about this play being set when it is, and it being the characters that they are. Part of the reason I love playing villains is villains are often, you know, at the top of the food chain in some way, and queer people rarely get to feel that way, and trans people rarely get to feel that way. So as an actress who's queer and trans, to step into a character that is at the top of the food chain after I've walked the streets of New York as a trans woman, it's really liberating. Cole didn't just write a great role, Cole gave performers like me a huge gift.
I was thinking about the fact that this part is not a particularly campy one, but it shares this quality with some of the kind of icons of drag performance, like Liza Minnelli and Judy Garland, which is this big-eyed excitement about whatever is in front of her or in her peripheral vision that immediately becomes the center of things, like a kind of
Yeah,
like a
like an
like a combination.
alcoholic.
Yeah.
Um, I've watched so many interviews of Cole's, and I've been a fan of Cole's for at least 20 years now. And I've been a friend of Cole's for about 13 years now. And when you watch the interviews Cole gave talking about creating this character, I'm like, "Oh, so you and I are one and the same." And that was I mean, the second I saw Cole perform this, like, a year and a half ago off Broadway, I told Cole, "If it ever gets to the point that you're looking for other people to take over this role, I would only want to do it after you've completely gotten everything you want out of it. But I would love for a chance to play this role because this role is very real, even though she's written like the Tasmanian Devil, she's a very real character, and that's why this is also funny. The show is so funny because it's written about actual, true, honest things. in the most stupid way, and that is my favorite way to work. I love talking about serious topics that we need to talk about in the stupidest way possible, because not only am I having fun, but my audience is having fun, but we all know what we're really talking about.
You've played on stage every possible alignment of gender.
I have. Thank you for noting that. Thank you.
I mean, you've played straight dudes when you were young and identifying as a gay man.
Mhm.
You've played drag performances. You've played uh, women's roles that were sort of semi-drag performances. You've played straight ahead women's roles.
Mhm.
Like every type of alignment of gender presentation on stage, and its relationship to your gender identity and presentation in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy the most?
As far as what I've played,
Yeah, I mean, what do you like to do? Is it
everything up until playing women was a compromise, you know? And drag was my solution before I decided to transition. And I think, it's if you're paying attention to the drag sphere of, what's going on in our world, that's a very true story for a lot of us. Like, drag doesn't make you trans, but trans people seek drag because it's one of the first ways of reimagining yourself. As Sacha Colby said, God doesn't make mistakes, but sometimes he's making suggestions that you need to build upon. And I thought that was really beautiful because the reason why I've played all of those roles on stage is because I've played all of those roles in my life. And that's what every trans person has to do. And, being amidst my own medical transition, it's like you go through a stage where you are neither gender, as you're letting go of your previous self and transitioning into your new self. The big thing that I find so asinine about the whole conversation around gender is we all are doing this constantly. Trans people just do it in a very visible way. But when you dye your hair, you're deciding to take charge of how the world sees you. When you go from glasses to contacts, the shoes you decide to wear, and men who think they're immune from it, like what decision went into you choosing the color of your tie today because that's your drag. You know what I mean? Like we all do it. So this conversation of some people are just doing what's natural. It's like, no, you were conditioned like the rest of us, and you were using clothing and gender and aesthetic markers to show the world who you want them to see you as.
How is your experience walking down the street in New York City different as you've transitioned, both
Honestly,
both socially and physically, medically?
I'm sorry to interject, but it's
Yeah.
like what's so funny is it's the same, just the slurs have changed. And, there's also sometimes there's people who can't take their eyes off me and I'm like, "What are they staring at?" And then I recently was talking to someone about it, and it just came to me. If they in their mind believe that they can see that I'm a trans woman, they might just be staring at me because there's one of those trans women I've heard so much about constantly. There she is. What do I do? What do I do? Because they've been fed nonstop BS about us and they don't even actually care, but they notice me and they're like, I'm supposed to care about something about this person. And it's like, I didn't ask to be the center of attention just for being what I believe I was meant to be, you know? Someone else made me, but luckily I like the spotlight.
Well, that's what I was about to say. It must really complicate things when you're walking down the street and you can't tell if someone is staring at you because they're uncomfortable with your presentation in some way, or because
They recognize me.
they're like, oh, there goes Jinkx Monsoon.
It's difficult, you know? It's not easy to navigate. The theater provides rides to and from the theater. If I wanted, I could take cars everywhere, but we both know that's not practical in New York. So oftentimes, walking down the street is what's best for me to do, even though anything could happen from adoration to physical threat, you know? What's frustrating is there is so many times that people stop me to give me just the best comment, that means the world to me and helps keep me going. Unfortunately, I miss tons of that because my method to deal with that dichotomy is to put on my sunglasses and put in my noise cancellation headphones and walk from A to B as fast as possible. And I've made a game out of it, like get through Times Square as quickly as possible with as few people noticing you, because that's what brings the most ease to my life. It is something I still don't really know how to comprehend, how I can be a celebrated star on Broadway and still feel so unsafe walking down the street, but the thing is, talk to any famous woman and she's probably dealing with it. It's not a trans thing. I talk to my therapist a lot about it.
Something that you just said is something that had not occurred to me in the slightest, which is when you're an actor on Broadway, your workplace is Times Square.
Yeah.
And even as a 6'4" 210 pound cis straight guy,
Yeah.
it's a trial. And the idea of doing that when you're in a situation where you're vulnerable more broadly is stomach churning.
And again, I'm going to say thank you for your empathy. I mean, first it was for the aunt, now it's for me. But the point being that I think I asked a friend of mine who I've talked about all of this at great length with. I was like, will you help me boil it down? What makes masculinity toxic? Because masculinity is not naturally toxic. There's nothing wrong with being a masculine person. It's how you use your masculinity and how you impose it on others and how you treat it and how you relate to it. And I believe that masculinity was meant to be a force of protection, and it's morphed into a force of aggression and attack. And so I asked my friend, help me boil this down to a sentence I can say. And he said, lots of men lack empathy. It's that simple. They just, because of their privileges, they've never been asked to think about the other person. They've never been forced to think about the other person, and when life is set up for you, you don't realize how difficult it is if it isn't. You know what I mean? Because nothing's set up for trans people. We have to carve our path constantly.
As someone who has transitioned in midlife, you had the experience of being younger, and even as a drag performer, having the opportunity to walk through the world with your mask on. You could always put on a beat up leather jacket and keep your head down and barrel down a sidewalk.
You'd think. But no, because you have to walk right and you have to be the right build. And if you slip up and someone catches it, I tried. Ask any trans person and they'll probably tell you they tried. And everyone saw right through it. And eventually you just say, if no one's going to let me be even when I'm trying, then I'm not going to try anymore because I'm not going to live the rest of my life unhappy like this. And every person should do that for themselves, regardless of whether they are satisfied with the gender assigned to them or not. We all have to make that decision to stop doing ourself for other people, especially some arbitrary opinion that was formed by people we don't even like.
How is the experience of walking down the street different for you within yourself? Leaving aside the tip of the spear of hatred.
What's changed is if I'm going to get called slurs, I'm going to get called slurs looking the way I want to look. If someone attacks me, then I'm going to go out knowing that I looked the way I wanted people to see me. And I didn't let someone else control me by fear. It's like the feeling of empowerment I get by dressing like a sexy middle-aged witch. It's almost like what I think keeps people at bay from me is, like I said, I have intention when I walk down the street and I make it very clear. I'm not about to be stopped and messed with.
I mean, Jinkx, as you sit before me right now, or at least sit before me 3,000 miles away from me through a Zoom camera, you are wearing large, dangly earrings of what look like broadswords.
Yeah. I got gifted these at the stage door during Pirates, and I like wearing them a lot because, I've been trained in stage combat.
You weren't just like, oh, come on, this is a pirate show. We're doing épées and foils. This is a saber show.
No, we had scimitars.
Oh.
No, the Pirate King had scimitar. I think we all had scimitars. Anyway, the point is, I've talked to co-stars before, and I've thanked them for never treating me like anything but the leading lady. Like, my gender identity never really came up because all they needed to know was I was playing the female lead and I was the leading lady and treat me like any leading lady. But that's the thing is, like, I think I dealt with way more BS when I was trying to fit the mold, because now I don't look like an uncomfortable person in men's clothes uncomfortably walking down the street. I look like a person who knows exactly who she is, who chose her outfit intentionally, walking around with confidence because she loves the way she looks.
I read an interview from when you were guest starring on Doctor Who. You were a villain on Doctor Who. And one of the questions that the interviewer asked was, if you had a TARDIS, where would you go? And your answer was that you would go see Elaine Stritch at Liberty. The Elaine Stritch's one-woman show, which is available on video, unlike Dinosaurs, for example.
Hey, you can't synthesize a live performance, I have listened to the audio recording of that performance so many times. I learned from her in At Liberty in the way she performed, period. She was so honest and upfront and candid with anyone who would listen. I used to think there were things I needed to keep private because if people heard those things about me, they'd be like, "Ew." And instead, opening up about those, uncomfortable parts of me, ADHD, trans identity, alcoholism, past trauma, it's like it's only connected me with my audience more. And Elaine Stritch strikes me as someone who, even if she was difficult, she was honest, and you knew that she cared.
You went to theater school, and I read an interview where you said that your favorite class that you took at theater school was a Commedia Dell'arte class.
Yeah.
I love to bring up Commedia Dell'arte on
So do I.
this program.
It takes a special kind of person who just loves to bring up Commedia Dell'arte.
What did you love about learning Commedia?
It was the first time that a teacher or anyone in the acting world told me there's 2 approaches to finding your character, and neither one is better. You can either start from the inside, think about that character's internal life, and then let it inform the form and the shape of that character. Or if you're having trouble connecting to that person, that character's internal life, get into their form and see how it makes you feel. And it's kind of poignant that you brought it up because it's like Mary Todd is a perfect character to examine that. Like she's got so much internal life, but let's say you have no connection to that. Get in that costume we talked about and see how that makes you feel. See how it feels when you can't just easily do anything. It's like being in a cage. Like, even though you can get around and do everything, it's like trying to do that with sandbags on. So I loved Commedia dell'arte because we examined both approaches for the intention of comedy, like for the intention of finding what's funniest.
It's exciting in theater school just to get to do something where the point is to be funny.
Yeah, but once the first day of class, the teacher said, "Okay, who wants to volunteer?" Someone volunteers. They go up and stand up in front of everyone, and he goes, "Okay, be funny." Let me tell you, not a lot of funny stuff happened that day because comedy is a science. And the second someone says, "Be funny," I don't know, that's not a good start to something that requires scientific accuracy. But so you can't the way you train in comedy is just start doing it and just start failing at it and find out what doesn't work because that's just as important.
Your career as a drag performer has kind of tracked with these huge changes in drag's place in American culture specifically. There was a time when it was essentially not on the radar of most Americans. There was a time when it was charming and felt powerless enough to many Americans that they were not bothered by it.
Mhm.
In recent years, it has become very deeply villainized.
Yeah.
If I had asked you about drag, 10 or 12 years ago, do you think you would have felt like the growing acceptance of the form would have traipsed along lightly and grown consistently, if not exponentially, over a long period of time?
10 or 12 years ago, I probably just would have still been in the stunned state that I was getting the opportunities I was being given as a drag performer because the drag lifers, those of us who have been doing it since before it had a place in mainstream society, you became a drag queen because you had no other choice. You just knew you needed to do it. Like that's how you were going to do all the things you wanted to do. Now, when I heard you ask that question, all I could think is what has happened to drag performers. That's just what happens to every marginalized group when they step into the mainstream. First, they're a novelty and they're cute and harmless. Then they start to have influence and power, and that threatens the people who are threatened by them because they represent that the old ways are on the way out, you know? So drag queens are just another group of people who are going through that same BS that people of color had to go through. Queer people in general have to go through still being in the public eye. Trans people are going through it if you're in the public eye. Women constantly go through it. So it's like at the same time that I don't want to compare my experience to other marginalized people because they're all so unique. It's also like that's why I relate to women. It's why I relate to people of color because we have all been treated the same fucking way by the same people. And those are my allies because we all get it. I know that I don't get every aspect of it, but I do get what it feels like. And then empathy comes into play again.
Jinkx, you can tell me if my read on this from the outside is incorrect, but it seems to me that the drag community is an intersectional one even more than the broader queer community, that people of color have always had a relatively central place in the drag community, compared to the gay and lesbian community of the 1980s for various cultural and safety reasons and so on and so forth. That the drag community has always made room for trans people, and now trans people are very central in the drag community.
Drag queens have had this very interesting place in the LGBTQ plus community because we are simultaneously celebrated and also blamed for everything. This whole LGB without the T movement, that's not new. It's just a different version of what drag queens and trans people have always dealt with, which is people who lack empathy, even within the LGBTQ plus community. And they think their life will be better if they just chop off one leg of this community because that's the leg that's holding us back. Wrong. If they know you will sell out members of your community, then they got you. Then they know your community can be broken. And then they know they can break you because they know you have a price and you don't actually stand for anything. So in the LGBTQ plus community, drag queens are the freaks of the freaks. The LGBTQ plus community is already an outcast community, and drag queens have oftentimes been ostracized and demonized within the queer community. So that's why we started making room for everyone, because in a community that welcomes everyone, we had to be the people who really welcomed everyone. So we are specially equipped for these things. And that's just all there is to it.
Well, Jinkx Monsoon, that's all there is to our conversation. We're out of time. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. It was really nice.
I appreciate you talking to me. This was a lovely conversation.